God bless you. Welcome back here as we're sharing with you phase 2 on this matrimonial session that we're having here. And today's message is called the fight plan. Yes, the fight plan. Listen, in the sport of boxing, and maybe some of you do not watch boxing, but those who are boxing fans, and if you're not a boxing fan, I can understand why. Listen, boxing is not just about a brutal sport, though it's brutal. There's a lot of strategic planning behind a fight. And the coach's main job, this boxer trains for 8 to 12 weeks to face his opponent, okay? 8 to 12 weeks. And we see that the coach's main job is to study the opponent, to study everything that this opponent is doing. And he'll watch films, he'll watch hours of the opponent, his style, his weaknesses, his strength, and he has to come up with a fight plan. And the day that that fight happens, that fighter has to stick to the fight plan. Okay, no matter what happens, he has to stick with that fight plan, because they've been planning for 12 weeks to fight this guy. So the day of the match, when they go fight, the fight begins. And it doesn't matter how aggressive or how powerful the opponent comes at the boxer, he has to remember, I have to stick with the fight plan. If I don't stick with the fight plan, I'm going to get knocked out right now. Yeah, TKO. So I have to stick with the fight plan. And I'm telling you right now, if he weathers the first round and the second round, everything will begin to settle down, and that aggressive fighter, his opponent who came aggressively at him, will lose energy, and now he has to settle down to his fight plan. But the boxer has to stay with the fight plan that the coach has given him and what he has been trained for. And the same thing in matrimony. God's word shows us and gives us the plan, the fight plan, how to fight the enemy, how to fight in our lives. And we have to stick with this game plan when the storms of life come. So we have here my wife, Gina, that is with me. We've been married for 20 years. This October, 26 years together, and gonna make 20 years married. And it's been a blessing, and we continue to grow in our matrimony. You wanna say anything to the people?
Well, I just wanna say, buckle up your seatbelts, because we're gonna give you some really meaty information that's gonna be valuable in your marriage, valuable with your relationship as a husband and wife, and just understand how to fight clean. So we're gonna give you the tools and the information that you're gonna need. As long as you apply these things into your life on a daily basis, you will be blessed in your marriage.
And with us, we have Glenn and Shelley once again, and we're excited that they're here to share with us, and they're gonna be sharing on what's the fight plan. So they are coached today. They're the ones that are gonna tell us, okay, this is the plan, this is what you're gonna do. So we need to listen and enjoy the program now.
Thank you. Yes.
Glenn and Shelley.
Thank you for having us. And I have to start off with, I think we've both been knocked out in our fights before.
Yeah, we have. And I want to go back and recap a little bit about that reaction.
Yes.
And how that is important to have that fight plan. And this happened in our marriage. This is something that we went through. Shelley implemented the fight plan for our marriage. It stopped us from reacting in an inappropriate manner. And it gave us a plan of how to stop. And that's really the what we need to do. You know, we talked about how many stressors are coming at us all at once today. You know, things are just happening, and it's not by choice, it's just things that are happening. You know, we lose jobs, we go into financial stress, our kids get thrown back in our household instead of going to school every day. You know, all those things happen. And I think that the fight plan that Shelley implemented in our marriage really began to work, because then it allowed us a pause to learn how to control our emotions. I was an angry person, and I still tend to deal with anger at times. Anger is something that is just wasn't going to go away for me, because I didn't have a plan how to deal with my anger. I didn't have a plan to address Shelley in a manner that where we can just kind of take a pause, take a breath, and allow things to happen. So without the plan, without the fight plan that we did in our marriage, we would have failed.
Right.
So I'll let Shelly go through the fight plan here and what we're talking about, and as we, it's just F.I.G.H.T, and it's the fight plan. So,
And I have
Ding,
to say,
round one.
ding, round one. And it's study your opponent. You know, I had not come from a background with anger issues, and I have all kinds of other issues, so we don't want to go there. But you know, I had to study my opponent, and I had to realize my response to being offended created a spark of energy and of anger through him. So I thought, I'm going to have to do something different. We can't just keep doing the same thing because it's not working. So I did some little investigation and a little studying, like how do we do this, and how do we have a healthy fight that honors God? You know, in the Bible it says, you know, be angry but do not sin. And so how does that look? What does that look like? And so really I would have to say that I actually found this, but we studied it together too. But it is F.I.G.H.T. And I remember the first time when I was going to implement this, it was something I was really upset about, and I thought, I'm going to do this right this time. You know, I really, it was so important to me to try to have a healthy conversation because our marriage is so important. You know, we want to make it right. We feel like this is right, but why is it going so wrong all the time? So I remember having this little card in front of me, and the acronym's FIGHT, F-I-G-H-T, like Glenn had said, and I really tried to do each one in order, and I thought, when he came home from work, I was going to be ready. And the first time we did this, it was like, it was such a change. And we were able to actually look at the issue, conquer the issue together. Instead of making each other the enemy, we made each other. You know, we worked at the issue together. And
Because
so,
I'm sorry to interject, but that's one of the easy things to do, right? Obviously, anger is an emotion that's natural for everyone, right? So you can't just go ahead and dismiss it altogether, but it's what you do in that moment of anger. So it's how you respond to it. But instead of making every fight about one another, it's really looking at what's causing this, or more like the root cause of what's really causing this fight.
right.
and that's really what we did, Gina, with taking the focus off of the event and being able to put it on our marriage and saying, okay, what do we do to make this workable for our marriage? What do we do that I can show Shelly the respect and love that she needs, and vice versa? And when we get to the fight plan, you know, this isn't the end of things. This is really kind of the beginning of things, of how to start. This isn't something that, you know, you're going to necessarily rest on completely. You have to then bring some other tools into your tool bag that later in your relationship or maybe on some more serious issues. But this is a way to just really kind of stop and be able to take a look at what you're doing and how you're fighting. Because one of the things that I noticed early in our marriage is how we were fighting was more important or more of the focus than what we were fighting about. And I mean, there was times about that I forgot what the issue was. I forgot what I was mad about.
It just kept evolving.
Yeah.
It was how we were fighting. That's where the problem was. It wasn't the issues that we couldn't conquer together.
Correct.
It was how we were fighting. So we changed that. And so we wanted to make those changes so that it was generationally. Like, this didn't just change with us. We have seen this in our own children and how they didn't have to start off in their marriage the way we did. So we kind of drew the line in the sand and said, we're going to do this differently. And it was a conscious decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's start with F, and F in this is face each other. You know, one of the more important things is that we don't do eye contact with our spouse as much as we do with other people. We tend to, you know, be looking behind a paper or paying attention to a screen, or, you know, they bring up an issue and we're really not engaged with them. So one of the things that's very important, and it shows value to your spouse, and that's really one of the key underlying issues of a lot of things is am I showing my spouse value? Am I showing Shelly value? And if I'm willing to put down the paper, or I'm willing to put away the screen, I'm willing to take my phone and put it in a different room and not worry about who's texting me back or anything else, and I'm going to face her and I'm going to have eye contact with her. That's going to show her value. It's going to show her that I want to pay attention to you. I'm gonna pay attention to you. And so that's one of the first things that we implement, even when we're mentoring couples, is we make sure that as they're going through some issues, they face each other and they have eye contact, because it really does. It kind of settles the situation a little bit, and further down you'll understand, if that doesn't settle the situation in terms of anger or welling up or whatever, there's some other things that Shelley will discuss later on that will be able to do that. And I want you to understand something. Sometimes it's not appropriate to fight. If you can't control your anger, maybe at that point in time you need to have a timeout. But the importance of a timeout is that there's a time in, because that shows your spouse value. If I have a timeout and I just go away and we don't deal with the issue, guess what's going to happen? It's going to come back again. We haven't taken a timeout. We're just ignoring the issue. So we're gonna bring it back to the fight at some point in time, an agreed upon time, when I have my emotions in check, she has her emotions in check, and we have the same goal, and we put God in the middle of it.
And so I really feel like the person who feels offended, so let's say the person who's actually getting mad and you're getting ready to say something, is when you need to say and stop and say to yourself, is this a good time for us to talk about this for me? And once I decided it is, then I need to respectfully say to my spouse, I need to talk to you about something that's really important. Is now a good time?
So find the right time.
Right.
If you're hungry, that's not a good time.
Right. And so, or walking out the door, or getting ready to go on vacation, or getting ready to go on a date. We can, as our emotions come up, we think we have to do it right now, but we have found you don't. You can put this on the back burner. But when it is the right time and you have your emotions under control, you need to say, I'd like to talk to you about something. Is now a good time? And so we do face to face, and that's how we do that.
We're serious about this with couples. We're serious about it with us.
And I love
as we turn face to face.
And I love how he said, turn off the TV, turn off your phone. Let's say this is important. This is important. And it's so important how you start a fight. Because it has to start with respect. It has to start with your emotions in control. So that's face to face. And then I have to start with I statements. This is the I in the fight. F-I. So I say I feel, or I felt hurt when this happened, or I feel sad when this happened, or I felt fear when this happened. Everything has to be with I statements. And what we have found is it just puts our spouse not on the offensive, because this is about us. We don't understand what's happening, but we like to think that we do, but we really don't. We have to start with I statements. This is how I feel. I don't understand what happened, but this is how I feel. I don't understand why this happened, or why you said the things that you did. Or
this was very important for me. This was something that I was very defensive. I was the youngest of 8 children, so everything always came to me, so I was naturally defensive, That's right. So it was, I brought that into our marriage, and people bring different things in their marriage, and that's one of the things I brought into my marriage is being a very defensive person, to where when Shelley would start something and she would say you, and this is where it went wrong. I mean, as soon as when you did this, or you were this way, or that sets off something in me, because I'm a defensive person, that just the conversation wasn't going to get any better from there. It was game over. We might as well not talk about this ever, because if you're going to fight, if you're going to put you in it, it's really a game breaker. It's something that's just going to end it. So I think it's very important. Go ahead.
And I have to say, I wrote down a verse that I thought really hit home with this one. It says, "No one knows the heart of man but the Spirit of God," which is 1 Corinthians 2:11. Because we do think we know the heart of man. We do think we know the heart of our spouse. And I think when we come at it with that angle that, this is what's wrong with you, then it just starts the conversation on the wrong foot.
And a lot of times based on an assumption, right?
Yes. Yeah, because you believe you don't do this if you love someone, and you don't even really understand what's going on.
You shouldn't feel this way. It's because of you, and them are the things that are trigger words, and you have to, start recognizing trigger words to your spouse, to where I can respond to Shelley when she says I felt something, or I feel, or I need. I can respond to that. I don't have to get defensive, because as soon as I get defensive, I step back, and my mind doesn't go to what she needs. My mind goes to defense, and how I'm going to defend myself from her attack.
Because
Well-
when you say, well, you did this, and it's accusatory,
Yes.
right? And so people don't like to be accused of things that maybe they're really not,
Right.
guilty of doing.
And as I studied my opponent, he had told me something that really helped me understand the way he's reacted this way, because he said he is the youngest of 8, and he said that his parents would line all 8 of them up in a row in this courtroom setting, and with the judge being there saying, you, and you, and you. And I just had to, when he told me this, I thought, no wonder he feels so defensive when I come in like this judge and jury that I'm going to convict you, because he had this very fearful, probably as the youngest child, that he shared this with me. As I studied my opponent, and as he was vulnerable enough to share these fears with me, it helped me understand him better, to know this is how I have to fight my opponent, which was helping him not feel offended from the very beginning.
If she was going to come at me, then I had to build my case. And if I was building my case, and I'm a very good arguer, I'm going to focus only on what I need and what my desires are. And that's really not what's conducive to having a great marriage. Having a great marriage is dying to self. When you
It's
die,
not defending self.
that's right. It's dying to self and looking unconditionally at your spouse. And the best marriage is her meeting my needs and me meeting her needs, and neither of us have to worry about the others, our self needs, because they're being met unselfishly by the other person.
And the next one is G, which is God. And I have to say, this is one of the most important acronyms, the G part, is because a lot of times when you're wanting to react out of emotions, you don't really know the real truth. And so you need to spend some time with God first, which means you're not going to react instantly at the situation. You need to spend some time to think about this and say, ask God to bring you into all truth. Because you could be misunderstood. You could be misunderstanding your spouse, misunderstanding the situation. And there's so many times that I spend some time praying with God and realizing there wasn't anything there at all. And God and me had our discussions, and we had our little, where I was able to not even have to bring it up to Glenn, because it was something that was really inside me that was really the problem.
It was settled in the courts of heaven.
It was settled in the courts of heaven. So a lot of time is to pray. Pray either, and a lot of times people will pray before they fight with each other, before they discuss something that might be hurtful. And if you are at a point where you can do that, that's great. But always at least pray with God yourself, so He can help you have wisdom and knowledge and bring you into all truth of really what's going on, give you some perspective. And then the H.
Well, let's go back to G. I want
Okay.
to say a couple more things about that.
We can talk a lot about G. God,
That's right.
We'll be all day.
You know what? It's so appropriate that G is actually in the middle of the word fight, because really it is.
I was gonna say the same
It does
exact
have to
thing.
be in the center of your fight all the time.
Come on.
And like Shelley said, there's two aspects to it. There's one that you go to God, and oftentimes we bring into our relationships things that hurt us when we were younger. I had a life before we met Shelley. We met very young, but I had things that happened to me that really kind of it develops who I am. And so I'm looking at it from that perspective. When she did something, I'm going to look at that from my perspective. And nobody knows Shelley more than God does, and nobody knows more of me than God does. So when we go in prayer to God and say, God, if please reveal to me what am I doing in this? What's my responsibility in this? And why am I looking at it like this? And why am I mad at Shelley about something like this? And I think when we're in prayer life with God in that silence, I think He can speak to us, and I think He can say, you know what? This is where you are thinking of it from your own perspective, not a godly perspective.
Right.
And then if you put in God in the middle of the fight, actually when it's happening, and if you pray together before you fight, one of the things that I always like to say is, would you treat your spouse the way you're treating her if Jesus was sitting there on her shoulder? As an angry person, a lot of times people that have anger issues say, I can't control that. Well, I guarantee that if you were in the middle of a fight and you're being nasty and ugly, and there's a knock at the door, and here comes Pastor Miguel, or a policeman, or somebody going to give you $1 million, whatever it is.
Right.
I'm sure you could stop it right then and there.
Yeah.
And so it's really about a decision.
Correct.
And it's about a plan. And I have to plan to control my anger from day one, in terms of when I make that decision that I want a great marriage and I want to fight in a godly way, I need to make that decision. And then once I make that decision, I have this plan. And when I have the plan, I can put my anger aside a lot better. And especially in terms of, if I know that her and I are going to fight for the same goal, it's a lot easier for me to put my anger aside than to have to be defensive. Because once I get defensive, I'm not putting my anger aside.
And that's a key, because you make that decision, like you said. Anger is a decision. We're arguing, someone knocks on the door, all of a sudden I'm able to control it. So it's a willful decision. I'm not going to control my anger towards my spouse. And that's why you just let it out, or vice versa. Because you're choosing not to control it. Right. So it just shows us the power that we actually really do have. Our willpower of actually controlling it. And we just don't want to. So it's very important to say in a matrimony, no, I have to control my anger with my wife or my husband, vice versa. I have to make that decision that I'm going to control my anger and not let it go, or. Let me ask you a question. G is the middle, and we know that with God in the middle, that's the way we're supposed to live life. But why is there so many couples that are not even Christians per se, and they're unbelievers, we will call them, right? But their marriages seem to be more successful than Christian marriages. How is that when I'm going to church, I'm singing praise songs, I'm singing worship songs, I go Sunday, I go Wednesday, I go to prayer meeting, I do all these church activities, spiritual activities. I'm in the intercessory team, but why is it that the Hindu next door has a better relationship than I do when I have God in my life?
I think godly principles are universal. And I think when we speak of, and like I said, the Bible is a roadmap and the blueprint for what we should be doing in our life and in our marriage, I think that those aren't principles that I think He's put something inside of each one of us that I think we know the difference between right and wrong. I think a lot of times, and I mean, I understand there's some issues and mental issues that sometimes don't allow that. But set that aside, and I think that God's put something in our hearts, in our souls, that we know that when we're being ugly with our spouse, it's not right. When we walk away, and I can think of times when we fought nastily, and when we walked away, and I didn't feel good about it. And there's a reason why I didn't feel good about it. God was convicting me. God was saying, you know what, that wasn't who I created you to be. That's not the person that is the person that I created. You are looking at a cultural issue instead of what I put inside of you. And I think that's very important, that I think when we see, and we had a couple in our lives that I had worked with that had a great marriage. And they weren't, I would say they weren't walking in the faith like maybe they should have. But they had a good marriage. But I think that they acted sometimes more Christ-like than what some people in the Christian church act like. And a lot of that, I think, begins in priorities. There are certain things in priorities that when we get our priorities wrong, then life doesn't go so well. For us, God has to be number one. And even before each other, we have to set God on top and put Him in the rightful place that He should be. And we have to become more Christ-like with that. Then we put our each other next. And it's not the kids, because when we put the kids, and I think you see that in culture today, is when kids have been put as number 2 in priority list, things go backwards. And it's not healthy for the child even. And really, as you're growing up, the studies show that the best, healthiest children are ones that had a mom and dad that put God number 1 and the spouse number 2, not the children. Children come in as
number 2.
That's right. And the children number 3. And so I think some people get those priorities right, whether they're in a church or not.
Correct.
So
Correct.
and things are going to go well, but I think there's blessings if you put God in the center of it,
Correct.
there's innumerable blessings that happen. There are things that will happen in your life that are unexplainable.
That's right.
You know, we've been blessed beyond measure because we made a decision to put God first. And we you know, yeah, it would have went well if we were going to put each other first and you know, we could have made things work. But we would be absent so many blessings of our marriage, of our family, of things that have happened in our life that just aren't explainable.
You need God to do it.
Absolutely.
So we have F, face each other. I statement. G, God in the middle. And H, Shelley?
Well, H is to hold hands while we're talking. And this was a big one for me because when I feel offended, I don't want him to touch me. And so I knew I was ready to talk about an issue when I was able to hold his hand and say, hey, it's now a good time to talk about something that's important. So then the H is to hold hands.
Yeah, and that was just, I mean, when Shelley made this up, it was really about our relationship.
Yeah.
And that was how she was able to know. And, you know, I talked about the timing of the fight. You know, that's when she knew that she could hold my hand, then she knew that she had her emotions in check and that we could talk. And I think it de-escalated me to touch her. You know, you look at the love languages of people, and you know, touch is one of mine. And so holding her hand would always make me de-escalate.
Yeah.
So it just, but that's one of the gauges you need to put in that says, okay, can we have a good discussion right now about this? And
so now I know how to deal with Glenn. I'll just hold his hand.
Right.
You know?
Right. And it goes back to studying your opponent. You know, my love language is not touch. His love language is touch. So if I can start on that fight with already meeting his love language, knowing that I am with you, I am for you, I'm not against you, that I have something that maybe I need to talk about because I don't understand something that happened, then it just starts the fight off with a win-win.
Correct. And now we're left with T.
T.
I'll let you deal with that one.
T is one of the most important ones, I feel, because of our nature and what we want to say. We want to put all of our case together. But T is tame the tongue. You know, we need to understand that we are in a fight for each other. We are in a fight for God. And we can't say things that we're going to regret because it's so sinning to say things that are not wholesome, that's lifting others up according to their needs. So we need to be godly with our speech, and we cannot just say what's on our heart because not always what's in our heart is good. You know, the abundance of the heart comes out. So we need to get our heart right with God and understand the situation so we're not saying things that are hurtful and damaging that could take years to overcome. Words leads to hurt, pain, so we need to be very careful to tame our tongue.
You know, the tongue is a double-edged sword. You know, it cuts both ways. It's so important. This T is so important to tame your tongue because words hurt. You know, the old adage of sticks and stones may break my bones, but
Words will never hurt you.
that's so wrong.
That's not right.
That's so wrong. Because, you know, some of the things I said early in our marriage was very damaging. You know, I used the word divorce. And I would recommend everybody take the word divorce out of your marriage vocabulary.
And annulment.
Yeah. Because, you know, it set the tone for every other fight because what was happening then was she had that in the back of her mind. I had hurt her with that word. And sometimes you purposefully hurt with words.
Yeah.
And I would caution that we don't always, when we're getting ready to say something, we don't always recognize the damage that that's going to do.
Right.
Not in our marriage, with our children, with our other relationships. But this is very important right here, is doing the damage with your tongue sometimes is it's so impactful for a lot of years that you can recall. You know, how many times can you recall a negative, somebody that said something negative to you than positive? And so that negative that you're giving your spouse is critical. And so pray about that. You know, when you put God in the middle of your fight, pray about your words. You know, don't forget that, you know what, don't just pray about your thoughts and what's happening and pray that God will fix the situation. You know, pray that God will tame your tongue, because that's one of the tools that we often use that just, you know, we just let it go.
Because we want to win.
And we say, well, you know, they deserved it. No, they didn't.
Right.
No. You know what, you're doing damage for a long period of time with your words. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Right.
Shelley, I want you to look at the camera and give those acronyms.
The acronyms.
Yes.
The acronyms for fight: to fight fair, to honor God. F, face each other. I, use I statements when you're speaking. G, ask God to come into the middle of your fight so that you can have wisdom as you come before each other to be able to speak about things that are important on your heart. H, hold hands. Hold hands when you're speaking to each other, letting them know that I'm for you, I'm not against you. And T, tame the tongue.
Yeah. We pray that this session, phase 2, was a blessing to you, and we will be coming out with phase 3, and we thank you for joining us, and we pray that you have a blessed day in Jesus' name.